Hello, friends. Thank you for joining me today. I love to think of us sitting here thinking together. Okay, a couple of things about my talk last week that might interest you. When I spoke about the 6 days of silence that spread over America, I was including the one of combined hope, prayer, which is D-Day. But during the week, I thought, of course, there was a seventh, another one that I didn't speak of, though I had spoken of it some weeks ago. Another day of silence, which was not due to shock, disaster, or even subdued hope. This was a day of awe, wonder, pure joy, celebration. July 20, 1969, the first humans to land on the moon. Now, I talked about that a few weeks ago, but I didn't mention that at least for several hours, the whole nation was silently enthralled at this giant step for mankind, as they put it. Yes, that was a day when we all, so to speak, held hands, not only around the nation, but around the world, and watched the wonder of humans entering the mystery of space. Well, I was pretty outraged. I don't know how you felt. Just a few days ago, last week actually, at that UFC gladiator fight on the White House lawn, that Secretary of State Rubio actually compared that crude, offensive, inappropriate fighting in a cage on the White House lawn, compared it to the wonder and awe of the landing on the moon. He actually said so in so many words that it was comparable in its wonder and awe, I suppose. I couldn't believe a Secretary of State would actually talk that way. Okay, another point about last week when I spoke of Secretary of Defense Hegseth not turning up at one of the international celebrations there in France, in Normandy, honoring D-Day after he'd given his own speech at that American cemetery. It wasn't his choice that he didn't go. He was disinvited by the city, the town that was holding that day in honor and homage. That town was so outraged by the way he approached D-Day, twisting it around to fit the right, extreme political right agenda. They told him he couldn't come. All right, just wanted you to know that in case you hadn't already heard it. I'll turn to a happier subject. Just a few days ago, the courts won another victory against the Trump agenda. The courts, I think of them in the old Roman terms, since I spoke of gladiator, the shield wall of defense against the constant encroachment on the Constitution that Trump and his team are constantly trying. The shield wall, the locked shields. The courts are standing up magnificently. And there was a victory a few days ago, which may seem small compared to the question of wars, inflation, gas, all the rest of it going on. But it isn't small. It has enormous implications. It deals with the national parks and monuments. And the implications are profound, what the courts have ordered. Well, I've spoken before of the first time I saw some of these national parks. 1947, The first trip we could take in a car after the war was over, when rubber tires were available, gas, oil was available, those days of two-lane highways, no freeways, those days of no motels. You'd stop at hotels in little towns or at the little cottages, very thrilling. Yeah, the visit to the national parks, we, as a family, I think that summer we went to at least 6 or 7 national parks or monuments, beginning with Grant's home in Galena, Illinois, and ending up in the Grand Canyon. And the impact it made on all of us, particularly we younger ones who had not seen the West before. It was enormous. The information given at these parks and monuments then were all about nature and the actual building of the park. Nothing about any dark side of these wonders. But this changed, fortunately, in the decades that followed. In the parks and monuments, more and more, there were materials of information, displays, brochures, plaques added, giving the fuller story of America. Not just the beautiful part, not just the shining part, the fuller history, including slavery, including what we did to Native Americans, including the drive for women's rights after centuries of abuses, including the disastrous, disgraceful way we treated the Japanese American citizens in 1941 and all during the years of the war by internmentship citizens, including some of the history of the Chinese laborers and the hard work they did in America and many of the abuses dealt them. Of course, including climate change and ecology. More and more of this kind of information was being given. And then I felt we're growing up. We're showing more than just the noble side of America. We're learning about all the challenges that we failed in the past but are trying to repair now, but that now we're looking at them and naming them. Last year, after all these years of showing deeply the millions who come to the parks and monuments every year, showing them the fuller history, last year, Trump sent Vice President Vance on a project to explore whether the United States was being shown in these museums, parks, monuments, in alignment with American ideals, and to remove any and all negative information, not just actually on the sites themselves, but in the media, internet, taking down any information we might want on women's struggles, women's rights, Black leadership, abuses to Black leadership, human rights violations, trying to wipe them out of our records and out of our minds. It went everywhere, the Smithsonian. The tentacles reach into classrooms, libraries, and now not just internet, but the national news stations, trying to take them under control, lying, twisting, which is among the first things that a dictator tries to do when he takes power, to wipe out real history, to make the truth fit into the purposes of that dictator's agenda. Yes, This is a real attempt going on, but just a few days ago, the court ordered full return of all that removed information. National parks, monuments, museums, all the brochures, the plaques, everything that was taken down, and dozens and dozens and dozens had been taken down, disposed of. The court said you are to return every one of them by July 4, and went further. I expect weekly reports on your progress of returning. Judge Kelly, who gave this order, said we must show history in full, not just the favored fragments. You have been trying to use a white-out pen on our history. You know, any therapist tells us there's no real healing, deep healing, unless the wounds, the scars, the traumas, the inner clefts, the abuses are looked at and called by name, along with looking at the perhaps suppressed gifts and powers and possibilities. We all know, and repeat it maybe too often. No, I shouldn't say we all know. Some of us know, and we repeat it too often. Those, and you can probably fill out the sentence, those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. Now, this may be an allegory stretched too far, but this past week I've been thinking of the reflection pool at Washington, D.C. Have you been following that story? It's quite allegorical. I remember seeing that the first time I went sightseeing in Washington, D.C. A beautiful pool of clear water, reflecting not only the national monuments, but the sky, the clouds, the light. Well, of course, Trump, in his attempt to remake Washington after his own image, decided to drain the pool and paint it bright blue, like a swimming pool. He spent over $14 million doing this. And perhaps you've seen what has happened. Just, I think it was a week ago, the pool turned bright green. Everyone apparently had forgotten the algae. And there it is, all ready for the 4th of July, shining bright green instead of reflecting the sky or even the blue he painted over. Again, I'm thinking, we can't cover up, paint over underlying problems, the algae. We have to understand the whole situation of that pool and the whole history of our nation, as well as our own personal selves, our own underlying problems. And nothing serves but the truth. There's a beautiful phrase in Scripture: you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And as we say in the courts, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. And that is a very earnest prayer. Thank you so much for being with me today. I appreciate it, and I will see you next week.